A second state, the state of Maine, has removed Donald Trump from the 2024 primary election ballots, make it the second state, as I say, looking to disqualify the former president in his bid to get to the White House. Well, he responded in a fairly typical bullish, noisy way, a tyrannical assault on voting rights, and labelling the Secretary of State in Maine, Sheena Bellows, a dictator. He doesn't mince his words. Well, delighted to be joined by Professor of International Politics, Scott Lucas, to discuss this. Scott, this seems like it's going to sort of just run on and on. There's 50 states. Are they all going to go through this process? We've had 2 have rejected him. 3, I think, have said it's OK. And this is just the primary ballots, isn't it? It's not the end ballot. It's the Republican primary ballot.
Yeah, Richard, it's really important to get to the facts because there's a lot of polemic and misinformation around. So you start off with the fact that in the United States, the federal government doesn't oversee elections. Because of the nature of the state system, each of the 50 states runs their own elections, including the presidential election. So that's why you're getting these patchwork of outcomes that come out. As you've mentioned, the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine state government have disqualified Trump for the moment, pending appeal from the Republican ballot. The Minnesota and Michigan courts and the California state government have said he can stay on the ballot. But what's interesting is that in all of those cases, the courts and the state officials have said, yes, the evidence has been established that Trump did incite or at least had a role in insurrection. Where the rulings differed was whether state courts and state executives have the authority to disqualify someone from the ballot like Trump because of that insurrection.
Because, Scott, this is really important. I think it's right in saying that in some cases it's a judge in a court making the decision, but in Maine, for example, it's the Secretary of State for Maine who's an elected Democrat. Well, it's no surprise she's not going to be very supportive of a Republican nominee. I mean, how does this work? It seems bizarre to most of us.
Well, again, I think it's important to emphasize that when the Colorado Supreme Court decision came down, a lot of people said, oh, the judges in the majority were appointed by the Democrats, therefore it's just a political decision. In fact, the Republicans who dissented in that decision, it was 4-3, said, no, it wasn't a political decision. It was a legal decision. Didn't matter who appointed us. In the case of Maine, okay, Democratic Secretary of State, but the fact is that there's a 38-page document which sets out the evidence, which backs up that
so,
ruling.
Scott, what happens?
Scott,
what happens here from here, Scott? I mean, if this goes state by state, surely isn't it just better to apply a bit of common sense, rush it up to the federal Supreme Court and make a decision on this? Otherwise, we're going to have primaries that are all over the place.
I mean, this will go to the Supreme Court, Richard. I mean, I have no doubt this will be to the Supreme Court, and probably before, for example, the Colorado and Maine primaries, which are on March the 5th, which is called Super Tuesday. That's when most of the votes take place during the nomination process. So we'll see how that court rules. It has a 6-3 conservative majority. 3 of the judges were appointed by Trump, 2 of them very controversially. But it is not a given that the U.S. Supreme Court will back Trump in December 2020. I mean, when he tried to go to the court and support the claims that the election should be overturned, they tossed the case without even hearing it, saying there was no evidence that the election was fraudulent.
That is so significant. If the top Supreme Court, because each state, I think, has Supreme Courts, if the top Supreme Court of the United States said that Trump couldn't be on the ballot papers, I mean, what happens next?
If he can't be on the ballot papers, Richard, he can still run in the general election. He can run as an independent. But I think realistically, what you're looking at here is, because remember that all 50 states have decisions here, I think the majority of states will not remove Trump from the ballot, especially those states that tend to be Republican, like my native state of Alabama. So I think we're only going to see a few states that remove Trump from the ballot, although 1 or 2 of them could be significant, could be the swing states. What I think is also going to add to this, and this is an unprecedented election, is, of course, we have got 4 criminal cases with 91 felony indictments against Trump. And what the Trump team's strategy here is not to have the case heard quickly. Not like you're saying that we need clarity before the primaries and before the election. They're actually going to try to stall and delay so that none of those criminal cases actually reaches a resolution before November's election, because as Trump himself has said, if he's reelected president, he will immediately try to quash the prosecutions, at least the federal prosecutions.